This next video is on how to properly install a wood screw. This may sound like basic, like why would you even have to have a video on how to do it, but you'd be surprised some of the things you need to think about when putting in a wood screw. Now I'm going to put some screws into these two pieces of pine here, and pine is very forgiving, but if you were putting wood screws into a hardwood like maple or oak, you really need to do it right. So I don't have any oak or maple right here, but we're going to do it with a piece of pine and teach you the concept of what's got to happen. First of all, you got to figure out how long of a screw you need. Now if I'm screwing these two pieces face to face, I would have to see what the total thickness is, and right here I can see that this is going to be 1.5 inches totally thick. So if I use 1.5 inches long screw, the point of the screw may come through. So I need to go back a size and put in 1.25 inch wood screw. So what I'm going to put in here is some 1.25 inch screw. I'm going to start off with a 1.25 inch round head. This is that round washer head type screw. And a lot of people would just put this into a impact driver and just force it right in there. And that would get the screw in, especially if in a piece of pine like this. But if there was a space between the two boards, it would not pull the two boards together. So what I need to do is have a method so that the screw can pull the two together. And the important thing about doing this is that the first piece of wood the screw goes through, it does not grab in. It should just slip right through the first piece and only hold in the second piece so that I could pull it together. If it grabs in both pieces and there's a space, once it gets to the, let me do this the right way here so you can see it. Once it gets to the head of the screw hits, the screw will no longer turn, not without stripping out the threads. So you'd have to make it so that the screw can slip through the first one and then only grab in the second piece of wood. So let's try that. So what we want to do, first of all, I like to drill what's called a pilot hole first. That's the hole that's the smaller of the two that's going to allow the screw to grab. Now if this was a hardwood like maple or cherry or oak or something like that, I would choose a drill bit that's the same diameter or just slightly larger, smaller rather, than the body of the screw, the solid part of the screw in the middle underneath the threads. And what I usually do is grab I have a drill index here, okay, that I'm picking my drill bits from. And I like to go down to the end where there's no flutes, it's easier to see. And I line it up, and I should find a drill bit that's about the size, that one's a little big, of the body of the screw, maybe a little under. So if I put that there, you can see that I can see the thread sticking out on either side, but the drill bit is about the size of the body of the screw. Now on a softer wood like pine, I would go even maybe a size smaller because the wood is soft. I'm going to take that and put it into my cordless drill. I like cordless drills. And I want to drill the hole the depth of the screw. Now, because I don't want to come through. So the easiest way to do that is take a piece of masking tape. Just pulled off a piece of masking tape here, and I'm going to actually tear it down the middle so it's not so wide. And I'm going to put the piece of tape on the drill bit so that I know where to stop drilling. And it could be just a hair short of the screw. So now I have this little flag on there, so when I drill the hole, I only go down as far as the screw is going to go through and I won't come through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my two pieces of wood just the way I want them to go and drill this hole all the way down until I get to the tape and then pull that out. That lines everything up. Now I've got the hole through both pieces. Again, if I was to put the screw in at this point and there was a space in between, once the head of the screw got down to this board, I wouldn't be able to turn it anymore, not without stripping this out. So what I need to do is drill a shank hole through here. So the first step is to drill a pilot hole. Again, the pilot hole is the size of the body of the screw. Now that I want to pick a drill bit that's the size of the outside of the threads or the shank of the screw, that smooth portion up above the screw that didn't have any threads. So I'm kind of going through my drill index here and finding the one that is about the same size as the outside of the threads. Okay, so now this will make a hole through just the top piece now so that the screw will not grab. This is the step people don't get. This allows the two to go together. So now I'm going to just go through the first board. I'll let it hang over here so I don't drill through two. So now the screw will slip right through and stick out the bottom, and then that's what's going to get screwed into here. Now I could screw this in with my handy dandy screwdriver here. By the way, this is a square drive screw. It looks like a Phillips, but it's actually a combo. They call it a combo screw. It doesn't work real good for Phillips because it's not as defined, but the square drive works great. So I'm going to put this through here and line up the hole. And again, this is pine. I probably could just force this in here without drilling any holes because the wood's so soft. But if this was a piece of maple, I would not be able to do that. And then I'm going to tighten this down like that. And that's how we would put in a round head wood screw. Basically 2 drilling operations. Pilot hole first, then the shank hole. But now let's say, for example, that I wanted to put in a flathead wood screw. So here we have the 2 next to each other so you can see them. So a flathead wood screw, oops, that fell off my board. Flathead wood screw has that funnel shape on it. Where am I going here? There we go. Funnel shape. Now, if I was to just put this in right now, what would it look like? It would stick up. I don't even have to put it in. You can see that it's not laying flat or flush with the board. So I could, again, force it in there because it's pine. It would probably sink in enough to look okay. But the right way to do it is to countersink it. This is a bit called a countersink. Oops, there we go. All right, and this one is for wood. They make one for metal as well. The metal one has multiple flutes on it. If you use that in woodworking, it tends to chatter. Doesn't cut as nice, so this woodworking one, the one that's just got one flute, one cutting edge, works the best. So put that in our cordless drill. And then just countersink this to about the diameter of the head of the screw. It's a quick check. So that when I put the screw in, the screw comes up flush with, or even a touch below, the surface of the board. So when I put that in, it comes out real nice. That's called a countersink. Now that you can also counter bore a hole, and to do that, I would have my shank hole. Let's just quickly drill a shank hole here, just so we can simulate this. Use the other end of the board. That would be my shank hole for my screw. But then I would drill a hole big enough for the head of the screw. And I would probably put a piece of tape on this or do this in a drill press, but I'll wing it right here for now. But a counter bore is where the hole is down inside. So now when I put the screw in, the screw can drop way down inside, and I can use a flathead or a round head wood screw, doesn't really matter. But the screw will drop down inside of there. If I wanted to put a plug over this hole to cover the hole and hide it, I could make a wooden plug and hide the hole. Or sometimes, if it's a real thick piece of wood and I don't have screws long enough, I can counter bore the hole so that the screw goes down inside there. So this is a counter bore. This is countersink. Countersink is where the head of the screw comes up about flush. Counter bore is where the screw is down in a hole that you bore a hole. Counter bored. That's where the name comes from. And that's the proper way to put in a wood screw. Now, there are some screws that you don't have to do much to put them in. For example, this screw that I showed you earlier, let me get it in the camera, here we go. This one has some backwards threads on the top here and a cutting edge down at the bottom. This screw will go in without drilling any holes. You use these a lot in construction. And what happens here is this is your drill bit. This drills a pilot hole all the way down, and then when you get to here, these other backwards type threads actually cut a shank hole as it comes in, and then you'll notice on the bottom of the head of the screw it actually has some cutting edges on it that will cut a countersink. So this will go in all by itself without drilling any holes. Now, when you put this in, though, you would not want to do this with a screwdriver. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the right size Torx bit for this. This is a T25 Torx bit, and we're going to put it into an impact driver. An impact driver is a tool that is a screw gun, but it hammers the screw in almost as it's running. It has a ratchet kind of an operation to it. So let's get a couple of fresh pieces of wood. I'll put them in the vise here. Again, these are not used much in cabinet work, but in construction and remodeling they are. So I just figured it's worth it to show you. And let's see if you can see this on the video here. Let me reposition my camera just a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to put this in right here. So that, again, I haven't drilled any holes at all. Position everything right where I want it. Now these secondary reverse threads are coming in here, going to ream this out. And when it gets to here, the cutting edges on the bottom of the head of the screw will seat it nicely. Pretty sweet. And that's a very, very strong screw. So those screws are designed for that. So if you have a screw that has that single little slit in the end, that's a drill bit in a sense, and that means you don't have to drill a pilot hole. It will drill it for you. You might have to drill a shank hole depending on what you're doing. For example, with these cabinet screws, that's what this one is. If I'm hanging a cabinet on a wall, I would definitely drill shank holes through the cabinet and then slip this through the shank hole and then line it up where I want it. And when I put this screw in, it'll screw right into the stud or wherever I'm attaching it to without drilling a pilot hole. So you do have to drill a shank hole in this case because this does not have any provision for drilling a shank hole. But again, these are specialty screws and just another little addition. But normally, and again, my students that are taking a little quiz that's going to be following this lesson, there are 3 operations needed to put in a flathead wood screw: a pilot hole, a shank hole, and a countersink. 2 operations, drilling operations, that have to be done to put in a roundhead wood screw. Pilot hole, shank hole, you don't have to countersink a roundhead wood screw because that just sits on top. And that's how you put in a wood screw.